Hello and welcome to Nurture Notes. We're back after a week off. Thank you for your patience. For those of you that follow going through Nurture Notes and noted that I was off sick along with the rest of my family. We were really under it with some kind of flu, and I don't even know whether you guys have been going through it recently. Maybe it's a change of weather, but hey, we're recovering. And so for those of you that are new here and have no idea what I'm talking about, then hello and welcome. My name is Naomi Aidoo. I'm an author, a Bible teacher and a YouVersion partner, and every Monday I share what's called a Nurture Note, both a written Nurture Note devotional that's sent to my email list, and then I also share a video version of that here on YouTube. So you can get the written post by heading to the description of this video and you can sign up. And of course, if you're watching this over in my email newsletter and you want to head over to YouTube to subscribe, then I would very much appreciate it. If you're not subscribed, then definitely jump on in and join. So we are looking at Luke chapter 16, and I'm not going to lie, it's one of those tricky chapters. It's actually kind of one of those ones that you wish that you could kind of just skim over a bit, just because it's hard to teach, if I was to be real. But we don't just skim over stuff that's tricky, because we're going through the Gospel of Luke, and it looks as though it'll take us through pretty much till the end of the year, and then we'll have a think about how we do Nurture Notes moving forward. But we're going to look at the parable of the shrewd manager, which is found from verse 1 down to about verse 12-13 here in Luke chapter 16. And I wonder whether you've ever found yourself looking at a chapter like this, looking at a parable like this, and thinking, what is the point that Jesus is trying to make here? Because as by way of kind of like a whistle-stop tour of what's going on in this chapter, there's a story that Jesus tells his disciples. The other people that would have been there would also have been Pharisees. Some of the Pharisees that were very much in love with their wealth, their money, and what it is that they had accumulated from an earthly perspective. And so probably not hugely happy with the story that Jesus was about to tell, and definitely not massively happy with Jesus. They were never his biggest fans anyway, because they were these religious leaders who were very much high and mighty and weren't really about what Jesus was about in terms of like loving the least and the lost. And so Jesus tells this story about the fact that there was a rich manager, a rich master rather, who had a manager, had someone essentially that was there to deal with his household estate. And we find out a little bit later on in the chapter that he's what's described as shrewd. Now, shrewd, just looking at my definition here, because I just got it, is having or showing sharp powers of judgment. So to be shrewd is having or showing sharp powers of judgment. And that is 100% what this manager of the estate showed. Because right at the beginning of the chapter, we find that he is basically being called into his boss's office. It says in verses 1 and 2, Jesus told his disciples, there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So he called him in and asked him, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because you cannot be my manager any longer. Now, I wonder whether him getting that call was just a bit unnerving, unsettling, him thinking what's about to happen. And so he heads into panic mode. He starts thinking, what am I going to say? What sort of account am I going to give? And he says, I know what I'm going to do. But what's interesting is what it says in verse 4. He says, I know what I'll do so that when I lose my job here, people will still welcome me into their houses. So he's essentially creating for himself some kind of insurance/backup plan, because he's thinking to himself, if I am about to lose my job, and therefore all of my master's debtors, the people that essentially speak to me now because I'm the person that deals with my master's estate, all of those people are not really going to need to have anything to do with me, and all of the above. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to slash their debts. And that's exactly what he does. Going from verses 5 down to verse 7, essentially he goes to his master's debtors and says, how much do you owe? Instead of this, write this. And that's exactly what happens. Now, we could think to ourselves, I mean, he's already in trouble, right? He's already not currying much favour with his master, and he's already essentially going to be fired. So we could be thinking to ourselves, is he okay? Because what is about to happen? What is his master about to say about all of this? And in verse 8 we see it. It says, the master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. Remember what we spoke about shrewdly meaning. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than the people of light. Then verse 9. I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it's gone, you'll be welcomed into eternal dwellings. And then goes on to say, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. Whoever is dishonest with very little will be dishonest with much. So there's a few lessons here. I think the first is that sense of shrewdness, but shrewdness in this regard, not just about the worldly wealth, but also about the kingdom principles. This chapter is very clear about the fact that there are certain ways to deal with human beings. There are certain ways to deal with people, and those certain ways, whether they are completely frowned upon or not, are going to curry favour. And it seems a bit interesting because essentially he took debt that wasn't his own and he cut it on behalf of his master. And his master was commending not the dishonesty, because it does say the dishonest manager. So it's clear he is dishonest. He has been fired. But what he's commending is the fact of almost like when you look at someone and you think, fair play. They're being intentional. One thing I wonder, and this is just reading a bit of artistic license into it, is whether there was that sense of, where was this shrewdness when it wasn't so urgent, when there wasn't such an emergency in that you were about to lose your job and you were about to lose everything that you kind of stand for? Where was the shrewdness then? Because this shrewdness comes about because of panic, and because push comes to shove, he's about to be fired. And I think that there's a lesson in there for us, that this shrewdness, this essentially having or showing sharp powers of judgment, isn't just resigned for when our back's against the wall and we feel like we've got no choice. But actually, how can we be shrewd in a kingdom, from a kingdom perspective, in what it means to grow the kingdom, to build the kingdom, and to use what it is that God has given us? Because what this man had, it says in verse 3, when the manager's deliberating what to do, he says, I'm not strong enough to dig and I'm ashamed to beg. So we know that there's this sense that he doesn't feel like he's got much, but he thinks, okay, what I do have is this job, even if it's for 10 more hours. And therefore I've got people who it's in their interest to invite me into their home, because I can make or break how much they owe my master. And if I'm kind to them now and I'm good to them now, then they will essentially let me in later when I don't have a job and I maybe need somewhere to stay. And lo and behold, it works. It works. It's not sin, so to speak, without consequence, because the man does lose his job. It's not like everything's reinstated and he's fine again, but he acts with that sharp judgment and he uses what he's got available to him. And I think there's a lesson there for us, for those of us that work, even for those of us that don't. What is it that you have got within your possession, within your influence, that can be used for the sake of kingdom good? What is it that God has given you, whether that be a position, a responsibility, a task, some sort of material wealth, whatever it might be? What have you been given and what are you doing with it? I'll never tire of reminding others and myself of the fact that God asks Moses in Exodus chapter 4, what's in your hand? And Moses replies with this, a staff. He says, I've got a staff. And here, the shrewd manager is like, what's in my hand? It's almost like that modern equivalent. What have I got? Even if I haven't got it for very long, because I'm about to lose my job because I haven't acted wisely. I haven't been intentional. I haven't thought about what's in my hand. And as a result, because of this bad planning and because of this poor management, I've lost my job. But that's when he decides to act quickly. Don't wait until it's too late to act shrewdly. Don't wait until the last minute to essentially do what it is that God is calling you to do and use what it is that God is calling you to use. Instead, ask yourself now, what have you got? What can you use? What can you share that will potentially put you in the good books of people, not by sinning, because remember, there's consequences to that. The man lost his job. But in such a way that affects the kingdom, affects the growth of the kingdom. It says quite clearly that the people of the world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than people of light. There's almost this commission here, I think, like, look at what you've been given. I've spoken about this in previous nurture notes. It's God's good pleasure to give us the kingdom. In him giving us the kingdom, he's giving you as an individual certain gifts and talents and skills. And how are you stewarding them? As essentially the manager, you're just managing those things right now. You know, God owns those things because he is your creator. And what are you doing to look after, to steward what it is that you've been given by way of gifts, skills, talents, traits, responsibilities, positions, income, any of the above? And how might you step into better stewardship and, dare I say, more of a shrewd nature of management as you head into this new week? Some food for thought from this quite tricky parable, I'm sure you'll agree, but hopefully that stirred something within you as you think about what it's going to take for you to take your management of what you've been given, whether it's the estate of a rich master or whether it's just your job. How are you going to act shrewdly and steward wisely, just as this manager essentially did when it was too late? Don't let it be too late for you. Keep going, keep growing.